Greetings, friends. Happy Thursday. How are you doing today? I hope you're continuing to make progress on all your plans for this coming year. And I just want to make sure that this is actually going in the right place. And hopefully it is this time. Yesterday, I ended up putting this in a different place. So I just want to check and make sure we're recording in the right place here and coming to you on the right page and trying to get all this technology working well for us so we can go. Yeah, it's good. Okay, great. Awesome. Let me get focused on our topic today. So, I do hope that you are having a great week and really getting going with your 2020 plans. And I want to continue to pick up this conversation on calling and talk about something I'm excited about today, too, which is that one of my granddaughters, Matilda, is turning 1 today. So she is making progress in growing her life. We're going to celebrate, have a party this weekend. Very excited about that. What about you? Do you have somebody that's you're celebrating, some kind of event that's exciting for you? Let me know about it. I'd love to hear about it. So, but I want to kind of maybe even add that we'll talk about that about Matilda's progress a little bit here in a minute. As a part of what I want to talk about today, which is calling and sort of faith and practice, and why, why don't we know our calling better? And so I want to throw out this idea that maybe maybe we do know our calling. I was coaching with some of my clients in the last couple of days this week on the topic of purpose. And what really came out of that is that, these people knew their purpose, and so how about you? Like, if you separate from whether or not you've lived your purpose fully out, right? Um, do you, if you're just inside yourself, if you're just talking about you personally, do you have a good sense of your purpose? Right? Just within yourself. Because what I found is that what I find with a lot of people I talk to is really, if I ask a couple of questions, they definitely sense their purpose. And the issue is more about their feelings about how they're living that purpose, or about how they're expressing that purpose in the world, more than what they know about their purpose inside. So sometimes I think we really know our purpose, and we really know, maybe even have a sense that that's a calling, that it's uniquely given to us. So why don't we move forward with it? Why don't we bring it, right? So I don't know. I think some of the time we fear the vision of it. We fear that calling, right? It's big. It's you know uh, what if I don't succeed? Uh, I don't even know where to start. How can it be that's really something I should pursue? Why would God call me to that? How could I possibly do that? So we have all of these fears that start coming into our mind and keep us from moving forward in our calling. Now, later on, maybe we'll talk about, like, why do we have those fears? Where do those voices come from? In the modern day world, we don't really like these images of sort of, the angel and the demon on our collar talking to us, right? Because it seems maybe silly in the modern world. But if the Bible certainly says we have an enemy, and literally that enemy mostly is trying to kind of affect our mind. And so if you think about that enemy being not only our enemy, but God's enemy, and God trying to say, hey, here's my calling for you. I love you. I want to be one with you. I want to, help you move forward with this calling I've given you. I mean, if you really had an enemy, wouldn't he be like trying to talk you out of that and kind of create some fear? So that's not really what I want to talk about today, but just food for thought. What do you think about that? Do you think that, a lot of the voices in your head that are negative, I mean, are you being negative to yourself? Is God talking negatively to you? So where do you think that comes from? I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. Tell me, tell me what you think about that in the message below. But What I want to point out is I think that sometimes we're afraid to start. One of my mentors says we're afraid to start small, right? Because to get to that longer term vision, that calling, when you don't know all the answers, when you can't see all the lights green before you start, is scary. And we're afraid of what people are going to think and all kinds of things, right? But let me share with you, a scripture here real quick. So this scripture says, "Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith." And so this is a verse from Hebrews. Um, and what I, there's sort of two parts to that. The first part about the great cloud of witnesses. And so we'll come back to that in a minute, right? Because that points to a passage that he's just talked about. But he's saying like, hey, let's focus on Jesus, the author, the pioneer, the perfecter of our faith. And I like that it uses the word pioneer, because I think in every journey, you know, I, I had an analogy I used to use about the programs that I was building at Dell, because we would start these things and they were small at the beginning, and we would just have a couple of people that were super passionate, and it was like, if they were, you think about the pioneering days where those first people and they're just fighting the Indians and they're just digging it out of the earth, right? And then we would get a little bigger, and we'd have another round of people that would show up and become involved with these programs, and that group of people, you know had passion, but maybe not as much passion. And they were interested in, starting to have the benefits and the comfort of that. And it's like the analogy of the second round of people that come to the town, and they're like trying to, get the playhouse going, or whatever. And they wanted to bring arts, and do some other things, and have the town have more creature comforts. And the pioneer group is still there going like, hey, we're still fighting Indians, so there's sort of these two things happening as you grow. But then eventually somebody has to start to think about civilization and say like, man, we need the railroad to come through this town. Otherwise we'll be a ghost town 100 years from now. And that takes the kind of thinking that's like, really thinking further out. But it all starts with this pioneering, with just having the courage to kind of get started. And so, why don't we do that? So let's come back to looking at those witnesses for a second, right? So when you think about this, and in chapter 11, that verse we were just talking about was chapter 12. And in chapter 11, the author of this book, writes all of these different examples of people who were trusting God. So, this great cloud of witnesses he talks about. And he starts off with this verse I used a couple of days ago when I announced I was going to do this, which is, faith is the confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see, right? The King James renders it, faith is the substance of things hoped for and not seen. And this is what happens, whenever we're moving forward. The future is always unknown, right? It requires us to, we're not seeing it yet. It's not past. It doesn't exist. And so you have to have some faith. And that's why faith is absolutely essential to performance, right? So when the author's talking about these witnesses, I just want to point out a couple of them, right? He says Noah, when he's warned about things not seen yet, the flood's not there yet, he builds an ark. And everybody's like, what are you doing? You're crazy, man. But he's building this ark, right? And Abraham, which I think is a great example, God just says, go to this place, I will show you. He doesn't tell him where it's at. He doesn't promise him when he's going to get there. He's just like, get up and go, right? And so, and then Moses, when he grows up, he's like, I'm going to not be known as Pharaoh's daughter. I'm going to give all of that up because I'm going to be known as a Hebrew. And so he's going to set his identity on being clear that God is going to guide him and not his status as, in Pharaoh's house. So that's just a couple of ideas around, you know, this cloud of witnesses, right? But they're pictures of faith in action, right? And that really to pursue calling requires faith. It requires us to go, right? Even if we don't know exactly how, even if we don't think we're worthy, even if we don't think we're skilled enough, um, even if we're not clear exactly what we're going to do. I'm personally in some of that space. I mean, God kind of gave me this calling to reach out and help people to uh, to grow their ability to experience their faith and their work together. And we live in a culture today where we think that that's just not even possible, right? We have this whole separation of church and state. We have all kinds of things that basically say to us, work is one thing and my faith is another thing. But that is absolutely not God's perspective, right? He called us, he created us in his image to live with him and to partner with him, and he's calling us to things. And so consequently, the idea that those are separate, all that really does is you know if we brought those together, we would have an integrated life. So what we're having is a disintegrated life, right? Which is kind of a play on words, right? Like disintegration. But we're actually living in a culture in which we believe we should live disintegrated lives. And the only thing telling us that is a bunch of cultural tradition that has nothing to do with reality whatsoever, right? So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. But that's the point of view I have about it, right? So listen, when I think of all of this and I think of Matilda, right? I want to come back to Matilda for a second. You know, she's 1 year old and she has just been growing, right? And she's, getting to where she's getting close to walking. And, and you've probably heard this before, like, when a baby gets up and tries to walk and it falls down, parents don't sit there and go, "What's wrong with you? Why didn't you succeed?" Right? They're like, "Oh my gosh, she tried to walk." They're encouraging and they're supporting, and because that's just part of the purpose of human beings. Human beings are going to walk, they're going to learn to talk, they're going to learn to communicate, right? They're going to bring their gifts to the world, and anybody that has multiple children knows that they're very distinct, right? Even though they come from the same parent, right? We have 8 grandchildren. Matilda's 8. Number nine's on the way. And all 8 of them are fantastically unique, right? Because God has built that into them. And they are part of, you know, they're taking their journey, whether they realize it or not, and you are too, my friend, to figure out what God's calling is. And so the biggest thing is to kind of, like, Matilda's not scared of it. She's just doing it. But somewhere along the way, sometimes when we grow up, our environment, et cetera, whatever, we start having a bunch of fear that we're not supposed to just continue to evolve that calling. And so what I want to point out is that calling, God gives us a vision or he gives us something that's in our heart, but we figure it out on the journey. If you don't start, you don't figure it out more. And to the extent that you do start, you do figure it out more. And quite frankly, God's helping you figure it out, even if you're not, quote, starting. But what if you were starting? What if you trusted that more and could, drive into that? So I think when we start fixing our eyes on Jesus and just trusting that he's going to help us figure it out as we walk, then we can stop waiting for all the lights to be green, right? Like, stop waiting for it to look like it's perfect or it's clear exactly how God's going to take us step by step. You know the step right in front of you. That first step to pursuing your calling is kind of clear. It might be scary, right? But like, just stop waiting and go. Just be like Abraham and go, even if you don't know the full action, the full answer, right? Don't focus your eyes on the reaction from people, don't focus your eyes on the results. Like today, you reach all the result, right? Like a child, if she got up and tried to walk, and the first time she fell down, she went, "Well, I guess I'm done. I can't walk." That's not how it happens. She just tries again, right? Just enjoy the experience of unpackaging it. So don't focus on the reactions of others. Don't focus on the results. Don't even focus on the realization of it, right? You know, what God's doing in your life is going to find its realization because God's the one that provides. And I'm part of a ministry, Cheryl and I, called Stephen Ministry, where we care for people. And one of the things that we teach in as we're training people on that is that we get to be the caregiver. We're not the caregiver. God's the caregiver. And results are really God's. Any farmer knows that he can plant corn and cultivate it, etc. But God's really the one that grows corn, not us, right? We're just doing the actions that make that possible, right? And in faith that God's going to do the rest. And so that's the focus, is to focus on him and what he's asking us to do. That faith, that if we have faith, that practice generates progress, right? And just doing the work today is making progress. Even if I don't necessarily reach a particular milestone that day, I can trust that if I'm working honestly, authentically, genuinely in what God's put in my heart to move forward into the world, that progress is going to happen. And I can count that progress as success, right? Even if today is not a major milestone, tomorrow might be, or the next week, right? So that's where faith and practice really comes out. And just trusting that God will be with us and provide the results the way that he intends to, and just to be on the lookout and to trust him. Hope that's helpful for you today, and have a great day, my friends. Take care.